Hi guys, welcome back. We're going to cover section C today, and we're going to talk about senses, okay? So we always talk about the common 5 senses, and you've learned this since you were probably in kindergarten. These 5 right here: sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch. But there's actually way more than that. You have a sense of direction, you have a sense of balance, you have you can sense when you're hungry and thirsty. So there's a lot more to it than just those 5 senses. But not all of those work in the same way. These basic 5 senses all work very similarly. They have a sense organ that helps you take in that stimulus, okay? And they use receptors. And receptors are specific neurons that can detect a specific stimulus, okay? And then it takes that information and it sends it to your central nervous system, where your central nervous system will interpret it and then determine a response, okay? So if you smell something, there's receptors in your nose that will send that information to your brain. Your brain will decide, this smells good, this smells bad, this smells dangerous. I'm gonna smell more because I like it. I'm gonna plug my nose because it's bad. I'm gonna get out of there because it smells like it's something possibly bad for me. Those are some of the responses, okay? So these go along with this kind of stimulus and response pattern. The stimulus is the input, and the response is what we do with that input, okay? So let's go through these 5. The first one we're going to talk about is the eye. I've got a big old eyeball right here, okay? I also have a video where I dissect an eyeball, so you guys can check that out and see all these parts, okay? So the cornea is the clear part in front of your eye. You don't actually see that. The white of your eye is called the sclera, and we're not really going to worry about that. The clear part is actually covering your iris, the colored part, okay? It's actually possible to transplant that. You want to be careful that you don't scratch it. It hurts really bad, and it can actually, upset your vision a little bit if you scratch it. So that's why you shouldn't rub your eyes when you have something in it. The colored part, the blue eyes, brown eyes, whatever, that is the iris. So I'm going to open up this eyeball. Here we go. Take off the cornea. The ring of colored part that you see, it's actually a muscle, okay? And it opens and closes, and it controls the size of the pupil. It has pigment in it. That's what changes the color, okay? Now, the pupil is just an opening. There's nothing there. It's not actually a part. It's just a hole in the iris, okay? And that's what light goes through. So when it's really dark, the iris will open up and allow that pupil to be really big to allow as much light in as possible. When it's really bright, the iris closes down the pupil because you don't need that much light. And you can do this. You just close your eyes for a while and go into the bathroom and then open your eyes, and you'll see your iris open up. This is why, like, if you've ever been in a classroom where you're watching a movie and it's dark, okay, your pupils are going to open up. As soon as the lights turn back on, you're like, oh, my eyes. It's because you have to give your eyes a second to readjust, and then they close back down because there's plenty of light and it doesn't need to allow that much in, okay? So the light goes through the iris, through the pupil, and it goes through this rigid structure that's called a lens, okay? And what the lens does, so the light comes through, boop, boop, and it actually focuses light. The light crisscrosses in the eye, and it focuses that image on the back of the eye, okay? Now, this is crazy cool. The lens flips the image. So what the back of your eye, what the input is going to your brain is actually upside down of real life. But your brain knows this, and so it reverses it. It makes it right side up, okay? Psychologists have played with this and tested this, and they've developed glasses, special lenses that flips the image. So then your lens flips the image again. And so now what's going back on your eye is the right side up image. And so for about 15, 20 minutes, everything looks upside down because your brain hasn't caught up to that. After about 15, 20 minutes, your brain realizes, like, hey, something's not right here. And so it swaps it again. Now, when you take the glasses off, everything's upside down because the brain has to catch up and readjust. Wild. Talk about motion sickness, right? Okay. So keep talking about the back of the eye, okay? The inside layer of the eye is called the retina, and it's actually a layer that's stuck to the back of the eye, the inside of the eye. And it contains the receptor cells, the vision cells. And there's two types of cells. We've got cones and we've got rods. The cones are what take in color, and there's red, blue, and green. You know, there's different color cones. Light has different primary colors than pigment does, so that's why it's like blue, red, and green instead of blue, red, and yellow. Anyway, and then the rods are what determine black and white vision. Okay, so when you go outside at night and everything looks like shadows, everything looks like silhouettes, the rods are working more. They are more responsible for our night vision. Okay, all of those receptor cells kind of focus in together and kind of collect these neurons into the optic nerve. Okay, and the optic nerve, excuse me, takes that information and it goes directly to the brain. The optic nerve is what's known as a cranial nerve. It does not come off of the spinal cord. It comes directly off the brain. That information is interpreted and it, gives a response. Okay, so that is the eye. In class, I'm going to teach you about the blind spot. Super interesting thing. The blind spot, or I'm going to give you a demonstration of it. The blind spot is where the optic nerve attaches to the eye, and so there are no vision cells right there. So you actually have a spot in each eyeball where if the light focuses on that spot, you don't actually see. But since we have two eyes, they kind of compensate for each other. They're always looking at things at a slightly different angle. And so the two blind spots are never on the same object at once, okay? And again, I'll demonstrate that for you in class. All right, now let's talk about the ear, okay, for hearing, our sense of hearing. Okay? So the ear is broken up into the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. The outer ear is what you see, but it also includes the ear canal, okay? So it's kind of this tube here that funnels the sound waves into the ear, okay? And it stops at the eardrum, okay? The eardrum, and it's kind of represented with this little guy right here on this model. The eardrum is a tightly stretched membrane. It's kind of like the top of a drum. That's why it's called an eardrum. When the sound waves come in through your ear, it hits this eardrum and it vibrates, okay? And then that sends the sound waves in further through the ear, okay? If you listen to something that's too loud or too strong of a frequency, you can actually rupture your eardrum and do a lot of damage to your ear, and it's quite painful. Those of you that like to sneeze and hold it in, this tube right here is where, we've talked about our ears popping with the different pressure. That tube leads to your sinuses and kind of in your throat area, and it's what relieves that pressure. When you sneeze, you can actually push a whole bunch of air pressure up that tube, and you can actually blow out your eardrum like that. So be careful doing that, okay? All right, then we've got the middle ear. The middle ear is the other side of that eardrum, and it includes these three little tiny bones right here, okay? So the eardrum vibrates, and it wiggles these three bones that are connected to each other, okay? So on this little model here, you've got the eardrum right here, and then up top above it are those three little bones. This is how big they are. These are the three smallest bones in your body, okay? Tiny little guys. One's called the malleus, or the hammer. One's called the incus, or the anvil. If you've ever watched cartoons, that's what they make horseshoes on, and they like drop it on people in cartoons. I don't know, weird. And the last one is called the stapes, or it looks like a stirrup that you might put your foot in if you're riding a horse. These are not real bones. These are little models, but that's how big they are. Three smallest bones in your body. So they transmit the vibrations then into the inner ear, okay? The inner ear contains the cochlea, which is this snail-shaped thing, and these semicircular canals. Now the cochlea is filled with fluid, and this is where the receptors are. So those receptors are little hair-like neurons, okay? So as the vibration goes from the eardrum to those little bones, it shakes the cochlea, Okay. And those hairs, they're not actual hairs. I'm not talking about the old man hairs out of the ear. They're hair-like receptors. They also wiggle. Those are connected to neurons that go into the auditory nerve and goes straight to the brain. It's another cranial nerve. Okay. As you get older, those little receptors get fragile, they break, they don't work as well, and that's why people lose their hearing with old age. It's also why you can lose your hearing with injuries. You can damage that. Okay. Now that leaves us with these semicircular canals, and that has nothing to do with hearing. That's these three guys right here. These are three loops. You can think of like the X, the X, the Y, and the Z axis. This is like the three dimensions that your body might be in. And these are filled with fluid. And as you move, as you lay down, as you lay forward, as you lay on your side, as you move your head, the fluid readjusts in there, and your brain can interpret that movement of fluid as what your position is. And so this is very useful in your sense of balance. Okay. When people get ear infections, sometimes they get dizzy because the semicircular canal is affected by that. If people suffer from vertigo, it might have a problem, might have something to do with that semicircular canal. Okay, let's talk about smell. The smell, the olfactory response is similar to the rest of this stuff. So in your nose, at the top of your sinuses, there are these olfactory nerves. That's the receptor cells. When you inhale, there's actual little tiny particles, there's molecules in the air you're breathing that stick to those receptors. That information is collected in this thing called an olfactory bulb, and it goes along the nerve straight to your brain. This is another cranial nerve, okay? And then it lets you know what you're smelling. Your brain can recognize like trillions of smells. It's crazy, okay? And that leaves us, nope, sorry, we've got two more. Taste and touch. So here's taste. You have taste buds all over your tongue. Those are actually what's like protecting the neurons, okay? So these are little tiny clusters of cells that are surrounding the neuron, the actual receptor, to take the information to the brain. Now your tongue is divided up into different regions of taste, and there's 5 different tastes, okay? The common ones are salty, bitter, sweet, and sour. And you can see how it's different regions of your tongue. Now, kind of overlapping some of that is this fifth flavor called umami. And that's described as kind of a meaty, savory taste, okay? Now, we can taste more than 5 things. We can taste all kinds of different flavors and tastes, and good and bad. And the reason for that is because most of our actual sense of taste is a combination with our sense of smell. If you've ever had a really bad cold, things don't taste as good. One of the most common side effects or symptoms of the coronavirus was people were losing their sense of smell and taste. And that's related to the sinuses and the respiratory system, probably. But people talked about like losing weight because they literally could not taste their food. And if it doesn't taste, it's not as fun to eat. Okay. All right. Touch is another one. And we talked about this a little bit when we talked about skin. You have different types of touch receptors, sensory receptors in your skin, down in the dermis of the skin. And the common ones will sense temperature, so hot and cold, pressure, basically if you're sitting or laying on something, just, if something's pushing on you. Touch, you can tell if something's touching you. It's similar to the pressure one, but it is its own receptor. And then pain. Pain is important because that's what tells us to remove ourselves from a situation that might be damaging the tissue, okay? Some areas have more of these receptors than others. Your fingertips are loaded with these receptors because that's what we're always touching things with. Your elbow hardly has any. You can pinch your elbow as hard as possible and you can't even feel it, okay? So some areas of our skin, some areas of our body don't have as many receptors as others because they don't need to be protected as much. The bottom of your feet have quite a few. Our face has quite a few different receptors. Again, it takes that information and it collects it, and it's gathered by nerves, and it goes back to our central nervous system. Central nervous system interprets it. Hey, this is good, this is bad, this is dangerous, this is safe, and it establishes a response based on that stimuli. Okay. This is just a picture of some of the cranial nerves. You don't need to know all these. There's 12 cranial nerves. Again, you don't need to know all of them. They branch off and go to either side of the body. Okay. The olfactory nerve, that goes to our nose, that's smell. Optic, that's for sight. But then there's the oculomotor. That's the nerve that allows us to like move our eyeballs around. It controls the muscles that control that. The vestibulocochlear, that's our hearing. Okay. Auditory nerve is an easier way to say it, but that's the official one. Hypoglossal, that's the muscles in our tongue. That helps us speak. Facial, that's our facial muscles, smiling, frowning, things like that. Glossopharyngeal, that is the cranial nerve that interprets taste. So that's connected to our taste buds. Okay. That's not all of them, but that's the ones that are related to the senses. All right. Bye.